I didn't find out my girlfriend cheated on me in some explosive, movie-style way. No screaming. No confrontation. No shattered plates on the kitchen floor. It was quieter than that. And somehow, that made it worse. I was 24 at the time, living in a small town in the Midwest where routines matter more than dreams. Same streets, same bars, same people who ask, "How's it going?" without really wanting the answer. My girlfriend Lily and I had been together just under 3 years. Long enough that people stopped asking if we'd get married and started asking when. That Tuesday night felt painfully normal. Lily told me she'd be late at work. Again, I remember nodding, telling her to drive safe, meaning every word. Trust does that. It makes you generous with excuses. She left in a hurry, forgetting her iPad on the coffee table. I didn't touch it for hours. I was half watching a game, half scrolling on my phone, when the screen lit up on its own. Just for a second. Long enough. A message preview appeared. "I still feel you on me." No name. No context. Just those 6 words. I stared at it like my brain refused to translate the sentence into meaning. I told myself it could be anything. A joke. A mistake. Something taken out of context. When you love someone, denial doesn't feel like lying. It feels like hope. But hope doesn't last long once you start looking. I unlocked the iPad. I wish I could say curiosity got the best of me. The truth is fear did. Fear that if I didn't look, I'd spend the rest of my life wondering. The messages weren't explicit. That was the cruel part. They were familiar, comfortable, the kind of conversations built over time. Inside jokes, complaints about work, comments about things I'd done wrong without ever naming me directly. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a parallel relationship. My hands went numb. Not shaking, just empty. Like they didn't belong to me anymore. I sat there in silence, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator, realizing something important. The relationship I thought I was in no longer existed. Maybe it hadn't for a long time. When Lily came home later that night, she acted normal. Kissed my cheek. Asked about my day. Put her phone face down on the counter. I watched her like I was watching a stranger borrow my girlfriend's body. I didn't confront her. I don't know why. Maybe I needed one more night to pretend my life hadn't cracked open. Maybe I was afraid of what would come after the truth was spoken out loud. That night, lying next to her in bed, staring at the ceiling, I understood something I hadn't before. Some betrayals don't announce themselves. They wait until you're quiet enough to hear them. The strange thing about knowing you've been betrayed is how normal everything keeps looking on the outside. The sun still comes up. People still go to work. Your girlfriend still asks what you want for dinner like she hasn't been slowly dismantling your trust for months. I went through the days on autopilot, nodding when spoken to, answering questions with single words, carrying around a secret that felt heavier with every hour. Lily didn't notice the change in me. Or maybe she did and chose not to ask. Either way, she moved through our apartment with the same casual confidence she always had. She laughed at her phone. She took longer showers. She started saying things like, "You've been quiet lately," in a tone that suggested concern but demanded no real answer. At night, when she slept, I stared at the wall and replayed the messages in my head. Not the words themselves, but the tone, the ease, the comfort she'd built with someone who wasn't me. I kept waiting for the right moment to confront her. A clean moment. A moment where I felt strong instead of hollow. It never came. The truth forced its way out on Friday. I'd stopped by a small coffee shop downtown, the kind with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu that never changes. I wasn't even planning to go in. I just needed air. Space. Something that didn't smell like our apartment. That's when I saw her through the window. Lily was sitting at a corner table, leaning forward, elbows on the table, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. Across from her sat a guy about my age, maybe a little older. He was listening to her like she was the most interesting person in the world. The way she reached out and touched his arm wasn't friendly. It was intimate. I didn't storm inside. I didn't call her name. I stood there on the sidewalk, feeling the last pieces of doubt fall away. There's something final about seeing the truth with your own eyes. It doesn't ask how you feel about it. It just exists. I walked away before either of them noticed me. That night, when she came home, I didn't pretend anymore. I asked her who he was. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. She froze. Just for a second. Then she sighed, like someone caught doing something mildly inconvenient. She told me it wasn't planned. That it just happened. That she still cared about me. I asked how long. She looked at the floor. That pause was louder than any confession. We broke up that night. No yelling. No apologies that mattered. Just two people sitting on opposite sides of a truth that couldn't be undone. In a small town, news travels fast. By Monday, people were already asking me what happened. By Tuesday, they were filling in the blanks themselves. I went home to an apartment that suddenly felt too big, too quiet, and too honest. That was when the loneliness really started. Loneliness doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in through small cracks, empty evenings, and used mugs, habits that no longer make sense. After Lily moved out, the apartment felt staged, like a place meant for someone else's life. I kept expecting to hear her keys at the door. I never did. I started changing my routine without meaning to. Different grocery store, longer walks after work, less time alone with my thoughts. That's how I ended up back at the coffee shop downtown. The same one I'd walked past the night everything became undeniable. She was already there. I noticed her because she wasn't doing what everyone else was doing. No phone, no headphones, just a book, a cup of coffee, and an expression that said she was exactly where she wanted to be. When I opened the door, it stuck for a second, and I managed to spill a few drops of coffee on the floor. "First time?" she asked, smiling. It wasn't a laugh at me. That mattered. We ended up in line together. Her name was Claire. She had a calm voice, the kind that doesn't rush to fill silence. We talked about nothing important, the weather, the town, how this place somehow managed to burn coffee and still taste watered down. She paid for her drink before I could stop her. I should have insisted. I didn't. Something about her confidence made it feel unnecessary. We sat at different tables. That would have been the end of it. Except it wasn't. 10 minutes later, she asked what I was reading. I hadn't opened my book once. I told her the truth. She didn't tease me for it. She just nodded, like she understood more than I'd said. We talked for almost an hour. She didn't ask about my relationship status. Didn't ask why I looked tired. Didn't try to impress me. She just talked. About her job. About moving back to town after years away. About how strange it felt to return somewhere familiar and realize you'd changed. She was 34. That came up naturally, without hesitation or apology. I told her I was 24. She raised an eyebrow, amused, not judgmental. When we stood up to leave, I realized something uncomfortable. I felt lighter than I had in weeks. We didn't exchange numbers that day. That surprised me. It also felt right. Over the next few weeks, we kept running into each other. Sometimes on purpose, sometimes not. A nod turned into a conversation. Conversations turned into sitting together. She never asked why I was single. I never asked why she was. Eventually, one night, I told her. Not everything. Just enough. She listened without interrupting. Without reacting the way people usually do when you talk about betrayal. No immediate anger on your behalf. No advice you didn't ask for. When I finished, she took a sip of her coffee and said, "That sounds painful." Not dramatic. Not dismissive. Just accurate. For the first time since everything fell apart, I felt seen without being exposed. And that scared me more than being alone ever did. Spending time with Claire didn't feel like falling into something. It felt like standing still long enough for my balance to come back. There was no rush, no pressure to define what we were doing or where it was going. If anything, she seemed more comfortable letting things remain undefined than I was. That should have been my first clue that she'd lived more life than me. We started meeting outside the coffee shop. Long walks through quiet neighborhoods where porch lights flickered on at dusk. Late dinners at places locals barely noticed anymore. Sometimes we talked for hours. Sometimes we walked in silence, and neither of us felt the need to fill it. Claire asked thoughtful questions, but never invasive ones. She didn't dig into my breakup unless I brought it up. When I did, she listened carefully, like every word mattered, but none of them shocked her. I realized she wasn't comparing my pain to her own. She was simply making room for it. One night, sitting in her car after dinner, the air between us changed. Not suddenly. Gradually. She didn't reach for me. She waited. That was the difference. When I finally leaned in, it felt intentional, not impulsive. The kiss was slow, deliberate, like neither of us wanted to rush something fragile. Afterward, she rested her forehead against mine and said, "We don't have to do anything we're not ready for." No one had ever said that to me before. Our relationship, if that's what it was, grew in quiet increments. A shared toothbrush that appeared in her bathroom without discussion. Texts that started in the morning and ended late at night. a comfort that didn't feel possessive. I started noticing how differently she moved through the world. She didn't need validation. She didn't play games. When she disagreed with me, she said so calmly, without making it a fight. One evening, I finally asked her why she was so patient with me. She smiled, but there was something careful behind it. Because I've learned what happens when you confuse intensity for connection, she said. That sentence stayed with me. Around that time, the town started noticing us. In a place this small, two people don't spend time together quietly for long before it becomes a topic of conversation. I'd catch familiar looks at the grocery store, questions framed as jokes. Casual mentions of Lily's name dropped into conversations that had nothing to do with her. Claire noticed too. She didn't comment on it, but I could tell she was aware. One afternoon, as we walked past the cafe window where I'd first seen Lily with someone else, Claire stopped. "Are you okay?" she asked. I looked inside. The table was empty now. The memory wasn't. "I am," I said, and realized it was true. What I didn't know then was that this calm, this patience, wasn't just healing me. It was setting the stage for something else entirely. Something neither of us had named yet, but both of us could feel coming. Small towns don't need announcements. They sense change the way animals sense weather shifts, quietly, collectively, and without much room for error. It didn't take long before Claire and I stopped being just two people who happened to be seen together. We became a topic. At first, it was subtle. A raised eyebrow from the cashier. A knowing smile from someone I went to high school with, but hadn't spoken to in years. Then came the questions disguised as concern. "So, you doing okay these days? Seen you around a lot lately. She seems different." Different was one word for it. Claire didn't belong to the town in the way most people did. She hadn't grown up here. She didn't carry the invisible map of old alliances and grudges. That alone made her interesting. It also made Lily uncomfortable. I didn't hear that directly from her, not at first. In towns like this, information moves sideways. A friend of a friend mentioned Lily had been asking questions. Someone else said she'd been seen driving past the cafe more than once. Another person told me she'd asked if Claire was just a phase. I didn't respond. Neither did Claire. That silence seemed to bother Lily more than anything else. One evening, Claire and I were having dinner at a quiet bar on the edge of town when Lily walked in. I felt it before I saw her. The room tightened. My shoulders did too. Lily looked good. That hadn't changed. But there was something restless about her now, like she was trying to perform a version of herself that no longer fit. She noticed us immediately. I expected her to come over, to say something sharp or awkward. Instead, she laughed louder than necessary at the guy she was with, someone new this time. Or maybe not. It was hard to tell. Claire leaned toward me. "Do you want to leave?" she asked softly. I looked at Lily, then back at Claire. "No," I said, and meant it. We stayed. We talked. We ordered another drink. We didn't look in Lily's direction again. That night, I realized something important. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way I'd been before. Seeing her didn't reopen the wound. It just confirmed it had healed differently than I expected. Over the next few weeks, Lily's name came up more often. Not because I brought her up, but because others did. Stories circulated. Contradictions appeared. People noticed things that hadn't added up before. Claire never suggested we do anything. She didn't have to. One night, as we sat on her couch, she said, almost casually, "People don't like feeling misled, especially when they realize it on their own." I asked her what she meant. She smiled. "Nothing, just an observation." I understood then that Claire wasn't plotting. She was waiting, and somehow, that felt more powerful than any plan I could have imagined. If there's one thing I learned about Lily after the breakup, it's that she hated losing control of the story. She'd always been good at shaping how people saw her. Not in an obvious way, nothing manipulative on the surface. Just carefully chosen words, selective honesty, and a natural charm that made people want to believe her. For a long time, I'd been part of that story. The stable boyfriend. The proof she was doing things right. When I stopped playing that role, the narrative started slipping. I didn't notice it at first. It came to me in fragments. A coworker asking why Lily had quit her job so suddenly. Someone mentioning she'd been seen arguing with a guy outside a bar. A mutual acquaintance casually saying, "She told me something different last week." None of it was dramatic on its own. Together, it formed a pattern. Claire and I didn't spread rumors. We didn't correct people either. When someone asked me directly what happened between Lily and me, I kept it simple. She cheated. I said. Nothing more. Nothing less. The absence of detail did more damage than any elaborate explanation could have. People started filling in the blanks themselves. And when they compared notes, Lily's version of events didn't hold up. Stories changed depending on who she was talking to. Timelines shifted. Names appeared and disappeared. The first real domino fell when the guy she'd been seeing, one of them, at least, stopped answering her calls. Word got around that he'd found out he wasn't the only one. That didn't come from me. It didn't need to. In a town this small, secrets don't survive long without active protection. I ran into Lily one afternoon at the grocery store. It was the first time we'd spoken in weeks. She looked tired. Not sad, just worn down. "So this is how you want it?" she asked. I didn't know what she meant at first. Then I did. "I didn't do anything," I said honestly. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You didn't have to." She walked away before I could respond. That night, I told Claire what had happened. She listened, then nodded slowly. "Once people feel manipulated," she said, "they stop protecting you." That was the moment I realized this wasn't really about revenge. Not the way I'd imagined it during those sleepless nights after the breakup. There was no satisfaction in watching Lily struggle to maintain a version of herself that no longer matched reality. What I felt instead was distance. The further Lily drifted from the center of my life, the more space opened up for something else. Something steadier. Claire reached for my hand. "You okay?" she asked. I was. For the first time since everything started falling apart, I wasn't waiting for the next hit. I was watching the consequences unfold without me needing to push them. And that changed everything. By the time people started openly questioning Lily's stories, I had already stopped thinking about her every day. That surprised me. For a while, she'd been the axis everything rotated around. Anger, disbelief, hurt. Now she felt like background noise, something I noticed only when it got loud enough. The town, on the other hand, was paying attention. It wasn't gossip in the dramatic sense. No one was whispering behind hands or leaning in too close. It was quieter than that. People compared experiences without realizing that's what they were doing. A comment here, a contradiction there. Enough small moments to create doubt where certainty used to be. One night, Claire and I were invited to a friend's backyard get-together. Nothing fancy, string lights, folding chairs, a cooler full of beer. The kind of event where conversations drift and overlap. Lily was there too. She arrived late. I watched her scan the group when she walked in. She smiled, waved, hugged a few people. But something was off. The warmth she expected didn't come back to her the way it used to. People were polite, distant, careful. She noticed. At one point, she tried to pull me aside. I shook my head. Claire was standing a few feet away, talking to someone, completely at ease. I stayed where I was. Lily didn't push it. Later that night, someone mentioned one of the guys Lily had been involved with. Apparently, he'd started dating someone else in town. The conversation wasn't pointed. It didn't need to be. Lily went quiet. That was the moment I understood something important. The truth doesn't need an advocate when it's consistent. Lies do. Claire squeezed my hand once, subtle enough that no one noticed. "You didn't do this," she whispered. I knew that, but hearing it out loud mattered. On the drive home, I asked Claire if she ever felt tempted to step in. To explain. To defend me. She shook her head. People trust what they discover more than what they're told. That sentence stuck with me. Lily tried reaching out a few days later. A long message. Apologies mixed with explanations. Responsibility diluted just enough to keep her ego intact. I didn't respond. Not out of spite. Out of closure. I realized I didn't need her to understand what she'd done. I needed to understand that it no longer defined me. The town moved on. Slowly, but unmistakably. New stories replaced old ones. New couples appeared. New problems took center stage. Lily faded into the background of my life the same way she'd once faded out of the truth. Gradually, then all at once. Claire and I didn't celebrate that. We just kept living. And that, I was starting to realize, was the most effective form of revenge there was. People imagine revenge as something active. Confrontations. Exposure. A dramatic moment where everything finally evens out. That's what I used to imagine too. Some perfect scene where Lily realized exactly what she'd lost and what she'd done. That moment never came. Instead, what happened was quieter and far more permanent. Lily stopped being invited to things. Not intentionally, at least not at first. Group chats moved without her. Plans formed around different people. When she did show up somewhere, conversations shifted the way they do when someone doesn't quite belong anymore. No one announced it. No one had to. Claire noticed it before I did. She's isolated, Claire said one night as we walked through the neighborhood. There was no satisfaction in her voice, just observation. I asked her if that bothered her. Isolation's only punishment if you don't learn from it, she replied. Otherwise, it's just loneliness. That was the difference between us and Lily, I realized. Claire and I had grown closer through honesty. Lily had tried to maintain closeness through control. One afternoon, I ran into Lily again. She looked smaller somehow, less certain. She told me she was thinking about moving. I think I need a fresh start, she said. I nodded. That makes sense. She waited, like she expected me to say more. To reassure her. To argue. To offer something that would soften the weight of consequences. I didn't. As she walked away, I felt something I hadn't expected. Nothing. No anger. No triumph. Just the quiet relief of knowing her choices were finally her responsibility, not my burden. That night, Claire and I talked about the word revenge. She didn't like it. Said it gave too much credit to people who hurt you. This isn't revenge, she said. This is alignment. I asked what she meant. When people see who you are consistently, and someone else can't maintain a version of themselves without lying, things realign naturally. That perspective changed how I saw everything that had happened. I didn't need Lily to suffer. I needed my life to make sense again. And it did. Mornings became calmer. Laughter returned in places I didn't expect. Trust, real trust, grew slowly between Claire and me, built on what we showed each other instead of what we promised. The town stopped watching eventually. New stories replaced old ones. As always. But I remembered. Not with bitterness. With clarity. Because in the end, the most lasting revenge wasn't what Lily lost. It was what I stopped losing the moment I let go. If I'm honest, I expected to feel something more dramatic once everything settled. Some rush of validation. Some moment where I could look back and think, she got what she deserved. That's how stories usually frame it. Real life didn't. What I felt instead was quieter and deeper. By the time Lily stopped being part of my daily thoughts, my life had already filled in the empty spaces she left behind. Work felt manageable again. Sleep came easier. I caught myself making plans without checking my phone every 5 minutes, without bracing for disappointment. Claire was a big part of that, but not in the way people might assume. She didn't replace Lily. She didn't fix the damage Lily caused. She simply existed alongside me while I rebuilt myself. And in doing so, she showed me something I hadn't known I was missing. Consistency. Claire was the same person in private as she was in public. The same tone. The same boundaries. The same honesty. There was no version of her I had to decode. No undercurrent of anxiety about what she might be hiding. One night, lying awake beside her, I realized how little tension I felt in my body compared to before. My shoulders weren't tight. My thoughts weren't racing ahead, trying to prevent future pain. That was when it hit me. Trust isn't about believing someone won't hurt you. It's about knowing that if something changes, you won't be left in the dark. I never had that with Lily. Around town, people stopped associating my name with hers entirely. That was another shift I hadn't expected to matter, but it did. I wasn't the guy who got cheated on anymore. I was just me. Lily did reach out one last time. A short message. No explanations. Just a sentence about hoping I was happy. I read it once. Then I closed it. I didn't reply, not because I wanted the final word, but because I no longer needed one. Claire asked me later if I felt bad about that. I thought about it carefully. No, I said. I feel done. She smiled. Not relieved. Just understanding. That's when I realized the biggest thing I'd gained wasn't satisfaction or closure or even love. Though there was love, growing steadily, without drama. What I gained was perspective. Betrayal had stripped away illusions I didn't know I was relying on. It forced me to confront who I was when no one was watching, and who I wanted to be moving forward. And standing there, with someone who chose honesty every day without needing to be asked, I knew this chapter wasn't ending. It was preparing me for the next one. I used to think the end of a story needed to feel definitive. A clear lesson. A final scene that tied everything together neatly. What I've learned since then is that real endings don't announce themselves. They blend into beginnings so quietly you almost miss them. Life with Claire didn't suddenly become perfect. That's not how it works. We still disagreed. We still had bad days. The difference was how those moments were handled, out in the open, without manipulation or fear of what the truth might cost us. One morning, months after everything with Lily had faded into something distant, I caught myself doing something ordinary. I was making coffee in Claire's kitchen, barefoot, sunlight coming through the window. She was sitting at the table, reading, hair pulled back, completely at ease. And I realized I wasn't waiting for anything to go wrong. That was new. In the past, happiness always felt temporary, like something borrowed that could be taken back at any moment. With Claire, it felt earned, built slowly, day by day, through choices instead of promises. The town eventually stopped being a factor. New gossip cycles replaced old ones. People moved on, as they always do. Lily moved away a few months later. I heard about it secondhand, without details. I didn't ask for any. I wished her well in the abstract way you wish well to someone who no longer occupies space in your life. Not out of forgiveness or bitterness, but neutrality. Claire and I talked about the age difference once, seriously. She asked if it bothered me. It doesn't, I said. I think I needed someone who'd already learned the lessons I was just starting to understand. She considered that, then nodded. And I needed someone who hadn't become cynical yet. That felt true too. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone reading this, it's this. Betrayal doesn't always break you the way you expect. Sometimes it strips away the noise so you can hear what actually matters. It shows you the cost of ignoring your instincts and the value of choosing people who don't make you doubt yourself. I don't think about revenge anymore. Not because it wouldn't be justified, but because it's irrelevant. The outcome already happened. Lives realigned. Masks fell. Lessons landed where they needed to. What stayed with me was something better. Peace. Clarity. A relationship built on truth instead of fear. I didn't win by watching someone else lose. I won by building a life that no longer revolved around the people who hurt me. And that, I've learned, is the only ending that actually lasts.